Hi! Today we are Tuesday, the 25th of April 2017, and I will read the key 2 in this wonderful book, Master Keys to Personal Christhood, in link with Kim Michaels, who received the dictations of the Ascended Master Jesus for this book. You have the website of Kim, askrealjesus.com. You have many information also in the section of his website, community. You have a community and you have many free dictations in text, in audio. Many tools are given by Kim freely, and you have also his books and his membership for 1 year. I have just recorded a video in French just before this one, but it's in French. If you understand only English, you cannot understand this one. It's about a new formula that I have launched today, but it's in French presently. And with a membership, you can have you can ask me question every week. So for 104 questions in the year, and I return by email to you the answers and the answers of all the members who are in this circle of sharing. And I do a little club of spiritual meetings with that also by the web. I will do a book with all the questions. You can have more information about that and the membership with that on the section email, courriel, email of my website, Le Ciel Divin, or The Divine Sky. LeCielDivin.wix.com/The Divine Sky. It will be written below the video. So if you want some answers by email, I don't have time now to answer to all the people who write to me. I said that in the French video before. From the year 2000 to the year 2015, I answered freely to many people, hundreds and thousands of people. And at the end, when I decided to stop that, it took me sometimes 1, 2, 3 or 4 hours each day to do that freely to help people all around the world. And now I cannot do that freely, so I meet people on phone, in person, or with this new service. Or it's written also that for people who send me $10, I can answer to 1, 2 or 3 questions by email. So it's my website, The Divine Sky, the first section, subsection, emails. You will have all the information in French with the date of today, the 25th of April 2017. It's a text with the title in red, Le Cercle de Partage, ouvert dans toute la francophonie, open in all the French countries. Maybe in 1 year or 2 I will see it will be open also in English countries, but because it's more difficult for me to speak English, to write in English, I started in French first. But if you understand this message and you want to take part with that, you can write to me. I will consider this, and I will see. Maybe I will have a little section also in that. And I give also 30 minutes on phone for the people who pay the membership for the year with that. Okay. The key 2 today, from page 147 to 176, So almost 30 pages. It will take me 1 hour, maybe 40 minutes, something like that, 45. Okay, so it's 15 minutes past 7 here in Montreal. I start 147. Okay. Are you ready? I hope so. Key 2. Confront your fears. Why do I talk about confronting fear rather than overcoming fear? Because you cannot conquer fear through a passive measure. It is not a matter of performing some magical ritual that will automatically make your fear disappear. Fear is the most devastating of all feelings because it paralyzes you. It makes you afraid to move, afraid to change. Thus, there is no measure you can take that will automatically remove your fear. In the end, you will conquer fear only through an act of will, and you are the only person who can release that act of will. In order to do so, you must make a decision. In fact, we might say that your fears all spring from an unwillingness to make decisions. Take note of the deeper reality here. I have said that the consciousness of Antichrist embodies a duality, a built-in, inescapable contradiction. The consciousness of Antichrist is based on separation from reality. Yet, what is reality? Reality is that everything is created from God's being and energy. As the Gospel of John states, without him was not anything made that was made. John 1:3. Thus, the underlying reality is that all life is one through its common origin from the being of God and the Christ mind, the Word. The consciousness of Antichrist is separated from reality, and since reality is one, the consciousness of Antichrist cannot be one, or it would be part of reality instead of being apart from it. Obviously, this separation exists only in the minds of self-aware beings who are blinded by the consciousness of Antichrist, and thus it is ultimately an illusion. Yet, anything created by such beings will, by its very nature, be based on two opposing and mutually exclusive polarities, which means that it cannot have eternal life. Its internal contradictions will break it down, which is what turns life into a struggle, a constant struggle to maintain that which is in an inescapable process of self-destruction. In a sense, one can say that Antichrist is in contradiction to Christ, but it would be more accurate to say that Antichrist is in contradiction to itself. It is in contradiction to the state of Christ, in which there is no divisions and thus no contradictions. Much more on this later. My point here is that for each quality you find in the mind of God, the mind of Christ, there is a perversion in the mind of Antichrist, a perversion with two opposing polarities. When the Creator created the world of form, it had to start with an act of will. In order to change any aspect of your life for the better, you have to start with an act of will. For each step you take on the path of Christhood, you have to start with an act of will. What is the perversion of willpower? It is a duality in which one polarity is the tendency to make decisions without considering the whole, selfish decisions, prideful decisions, and the other polarity is fear. The fear of making a decision, the fear of setting in motion a cause. Thus, fear is dangerous precisely because it paralyzes you and prevents you from taking the very first step toward change, making a decision to change. Fear causes you to do nothing, to postpone making a decision, to avoid any decisive actions. Why are you afraid to make a decision? You are afraid because at some point in the past you accepted an illusion. One example of such an illusion is the belief that if you do not follow the dictates of an external religious authority, you will burn forever in hell. Yet, on top of that original illusion, your ego has built another illusion, namely that you must never look at the original illusion, you must accept it as absolutely and unconditionally true. You now have a cumulative effect, for the second fear prevents you from ever looking at the cause of the first fear. Yet, what is the key to overcoming the original fear? It is to recognize that it springs from an illusion. And how can you recognize this as long as you are unwilling to make the decision to look at the belief? This is the central mechanism that makes fear a catch-22 that traps most religious people and even many spiritual people in a blind alley where they can stay for a long time. Take note of the reality of the situation. All fear is based on an illusion, namely one of the illusions that spring from the consciousness of death, the mind of Antichrist. An illusion is something unreal, meaning that everything that you fear is ultimately unreal. Once you see that the cause of your fear is unreal, your fear will fade away, for you simply cannot fear something that you know is unreal. Just a little commentary. Some people say that fear is false experience appearing real. F-E-A-R. False experience appearing real. The fear springs from the belief that what you fear is real and thus has some kind of power over you. Yet how can something unreal have any power over you, and thus why fear it once you see? And thus why fear it once you see it as unreal? The problem is that in order to see the unreality behind fear, you must examine the illusion that started your fear, and you cannot do that unless you overcome the second fear, namely the fear of looking at the illusion. And you can overcome the second fear only by breaking the spell and making the decision, through an act of will, to look at your fear no matter what reasons you have for not doing so. This is the catch-22. Fear is anti-will. So it paralyzes you by making you unable, or rather unwilling, to use your willpower. Yet any quality from the mind of Antichrist can be overcome only by bringing the corresponding reality from the mind of Christ. So fear can be overcome only through will. Yet how can you release the willpower that will consume your fear when your fear makes you afraid to use your will? You can do so in only one way, namely by understanding how fear works and seeing that it is unreal. Thus, it is the truth that will make you free. The medieval Christian church literally had the minds of most Europeans in a straitjacket for almost 1,000 years. How could this be done? Because the church had created layers of fear that effectively prevented people from taking a rational look at the church's doctrines. Thus, people were afraid to use their inner discernment to realize that some of the church's doctrines were out of alignment with the reality of Christ, even though the church claimed to be the only representative of Christ on earth. Do you think it strange urge that I, the living Jesus Christ, should have to challenge the very institution that claims to represent me on earth? I do not, for I know that the role of the living Christ is to always challenge the established powers of the time. Do you truly understand what I am saying here? I have been spending a lot of time explaining that the essence of the path to Christhood is that you come to see what you cannot see right now, so that you can overcome your dualistic illusions. I have now explained that fear prevents you from taking a look at your beliefs and assumptions. So, is it not obvious that as long as you have fear in your being, you cannot freely walk the path to Christhood? As long as you are afraid to take a look at your illusions, how can you come to see them as illusions? Thus, one of the first steps on the path to Christhood is to become aware of fear and its paralyzing effects, so that you can build the understanding that empowers you to make the decision to confront and then dismiss all of your fears. Your ego hides behind your fears, so the only way to fully unmask the ego is to remove the fears, so there is nothing left behind which the ego can hide. And doing this must start with an act of will. The American President Franklin Roosevelt once said in a speech, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." That remark was inspired by the ascended host, and it is very important that you understand the reality behind this statement. I have said that the two main players in the drama of your life are your conscious self and your ego. I have also said that all fear springs from an illusion, meaning that it is unreal. When you put these statements together, you get the following teaching. Your conscious self is that part of you which is real in an ultimate sense, which means that it came out of God's being and it was designed according to God's perfect vision. Only that which is created from God's being has ultimate reality. In contrast, your ego was created by your conscious self after you started becoming blinded by duality. Thus, your ego is created based on the consciousness of duality and its illusions, meaning that your ego is ultimately unreal. It has only a temporary existence. It has no life in it. In fact, the ego can stay alive only as long as your conscious self feeds it life energy by believing it is real and identifying with it. As I have explained, human beings on earth have forgotten their true identity and have become blinded by the consciousness of death. The consciousness of death is based on the illusion of separation from your source, and because everything is created from God's being and substance, what Mother Mary in her book calls the matter light, separation is truly unreal. Yet, because of free will, it is possible that self-aware beings can co-create from this state of illusion. When you co-create based on the consciousness of death, the consciousness of duality, you will inevitably create something that has two opposites. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. You might recall that when the serpent tempted Eve in the Garden of Eden, it said, quotation, "And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Genesis chapter 3. The true meaning is that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a symbol for the duality consciousness, which is as Montreal explains in great detail in his book, an inevitable companion of free will. It is God's intent that you and all other co-creators should use your co-creative abilities within the overall vision and laws of God, whereby you will magnify all life, causing all of creation to become more. Yet, because God gave you free will, God had to give you the option to go against God's law. And here comes a subtle mechanism that I need you to ponder. God's vision is that all life should grow and become more. God's laws are set up to ensure that no self-aware co-creator ever needs to experience lack and suffering. Thus, when you co-create within God's law, you will never experience the conditions that many human beings consider a normal and inevitable part of life, namely limitations, loss, and suffering. Why did I say that I am come that all might have life and that they might have it more abundantly? This does not mean that I will give all people the abundant life. The true meaning is that I am come to help people realign themselves with the vision and law of God, which He has written in their inward parts, meaning their higher selves, so they can co-create the kingdom of God instead of continuing to co-create the kingdom of lack. When you use your co-creative abilities within God's law, you can only magnify all life, which means that you will not only enrich your own life, but also the lives of all other people on earth. The whole becomes more than the sum of its parts, which means that there is abundance for everyone. When you use your creative abilities outside of God's vision and laws, you will inevitably create lack, which means that the whole now is less than the sum of its parts. The logical consequence is that there is no longer abundance for everyone, which leads to competition for limited resources. This inevitably leads to a state where some people have, through deceit or violence, taken from others to the point where most people live a life of lack and suffering, and a small elite live a privileged life of affluence. I will later explain this point in greater detail, but I want to plant a seed in your mind. When you create within God's law, you affirm the oneness of all life, meaning that there is no conflict between you and other people. By raising yourself and becoming more, you are enriching the whole. You are creating from a state of oneness with all life and with your source, which is what I confirmed when I said, I and my Father are one. Or we can say, I and my Mother are one. God is the divine feminine and the divine masculine in the same time. He has the two parts inside of him or of her, which you step outside of God's law. You step into a realm that is based on separation from the source and separation from other parts of life. In this realm of separation, there cannot be oneness, meaning that instead of oneness, there is a state of division, separation, and duality. The logical consequence is that this realm of duality is characterized by opposites, which is what is truly meant by the expression, the knowledge of good and evil. When you are in oneness, in a sense, you have no knowledge of duality, for you think only in terms of oneness. When you lose that innocence, you inevitably become blinded by the consciousness of death, in which everything is seen as being dominated by two opposite polarities, such as life and death, good and evil. And when everything must have an opposite, Abundance must have an opposite, which means that lack and suffering suddenly become possible. This opens the possibility of a downward spiral that causes people to create more and more lack and suffering. The inevitable conclusion is that humankind has collectively co-created all of the imperfect conditions you currently find on earth, including all lack and suffering. These conditions were not, as many religions claim, created by God. Thus, they are neither God's will nor God's punishment. Although these conditions were created by using God's substance, they were not created in alignment with God's vision and God's laws. Thus, they have only a temporary existence, meaning that they are ultimately unreal. Here comes a truth that I need you to fixate in your mind, so you never forget it. I want you to contemplate this statement so that if I woke you up at 4 o'clock in the morning and asked you, what is the basic truth of life? You would be able to repeat it to me. Yet, more than that, I want you to internalize this truth and keep contemplating it until it penetrates all aspects of your being. Here is the basic truth about life. That which is unreal cannot affect that which is real. It's also in the Course in Miracles. Now compare this statement to what I said above. There is a part of you which is real, namely your conscious self. Because this self is real, it cannot in any way, shape or form be affected by the imperfect conditions currently found on earth. Although these conditions might seem very real, they actually have no power whatsoever over the conscious self. It is comparable to the sun, which is unaffected by anything that happens on earth. I need you to ponder this statement very carefully. You might fear many conditions on earth, but these conditions are ultimately unreal. And since your conscious self is real, it does not make sense that the unreal conditions on earth can affect that part of you which is real. Do you see that this is why you have nothing to fear but fear itself? Fear is a feeling that paralyzes you by making you afraid to take a closer look at what you fear. Thus, you cannot come to see that what you fear is unreal and cannot affect that part of you which is real. Do you now see why it is so absolutely essential that a disciple of Christ comes to understand why fear itself is the only thing to be feared? What is the consequence of fear? It is that it diverts your attention from cause to effect. You probably have certain conditions you fear, and thus your attention becomes focused on these conditions. Thereby, your attention is very effectively diverted from focusing on the fear itself. You are fooled into thinking that the cause of your fear is the outer condition that you supposedly fear. Thus, your focus is cleverly diverted from your psyche, away from the beam in your own eye. Instead, you focus attention on avoiding the outer condition, thinking that if you can eliminate the threat or protect yourself from it, your fear will go away. Yet, in reality, this is a lie, and let me explain why. If you will contemplate fear, you will see that fear always has an element of uncertainty. For example, you might fear a certain condition, such as illness or losing a job. Yet, most people find that when they actually face the condition they fear, when the uncertainty has been replaced by the certainty that the condition cannot be avoided, They shift from fear to a deep inner acceptance of the inevitability of the condition. And through that acceptance, their fear is dissolved, empowering them to deal with the condition in such a way that it leads to profound spiritual growth. Do you see my point? Only as long as there is room for uncertainty is there room for fear. Once certainty has been achieved, the fear evaporates and thus people overcome their fear. It is a common realization that the best way to overcome your fear is to face your fear, meaning that when you experience the condition you fear, you realize it wasn't actually as bad as what you feared. In other words, the fear itself was worse than the actual condition. And this proves that it is not actually the condition that is the cause of the fear. The real cause of the fear has to be found somewhere else, for it is not located in outer conditions. Now, let us take the next logical step. Where is fear located? You might fear the loss of a job, and that condition is outside of you. Yet the fear is not outside of you. It is inside your mind, inside your psyche. Fear is a psychological condition, so it is not logical that the real cause of fear must be found inside the psyche itself. Just a little example. I know somebody, it's a woman, and his son lost a job and was in his joy and went to interview to make another job and lost the interview. It's not a good expression in English. He learned that he was not chosen for the job, and he said to his mother, "It's fantastic. This job was with a salary of 75,000 a year. So it means that I will have a better job of 80 or 90,000 years." And another person could have been in depression, in tears after that. You see, it's not the outer situation, it's in our psyche, the inside thoughts that change completely how we see events outside. I know that while this might seem logical, you have been programmed to accept that psychological conditions are caused by external conditions. Yet, as we go through this course, you will gradually begin to understand that this is a lie perpetrated upon you and upon humankind by those who want to control you. Other people can control you only from the outside, so they must make you believe that outside conditions have power over you, including having power over your psyche. And while this belief is very persuasive on earth, walking the spiritual path is a process of unmasking it for the lie that it is. However, let us not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let us look at the inner mechanism that is the real cause of fear. Before we look at the psychological cause of fear, let me clarify what I mean when I talk about the psyche. I mean a part of your being which is beyond the body and the physical brain. But there is more to it. Let me quickly summarize how Mother Mary and Maitreya have described the totality of your being in their books. Your total being can be compared to a figure eight with an upper and a lower part. You see the number 8 with the circle upper, the circle lower, the 8. The upper part represents your higher self or spiritual self, what we often call your I am presence. This is a part of your being which is permanently residing in the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm is made of energy of a much higher vibration than what you find in the material universe. Thus, your I Am presence cannot in any way be affected negatively by anything you have done or experienced on earth. No matter what mistakes you might have made, it has had no impact whatsoever on your I Am presence. Your presence is as pure, as perfect as when it was first created. Your higher being also contains your causal body, which is a storehouse for all of the positive, life-supporting experiences, meaning they were in alignment with God's laws you have had on earth. I refer to this in the following quotation. Lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Matthew chapter 6. Your life-supporting experiences all become part of this causal body in which they can never be lost, meaning that you can never lose the ability to make use of them as long as you are connected to your higher being. The figure 8 also has a nexus, a meeting point between the upper and lower figure. This is where your conscious self resides, or at least where it is meant to reside. When your conscious self is centered in the nexus, it sees both the upper and the lower figure, which means that it can never forget that it is a spiritual being who is only temporarily expressing itself through the lower being and the body on earth. Furthermore, by being connected to your I Am presence, your conscious self will have dominion over your lower being and your outer circumstances. You will be the living Christ on earth, and thus God can work through you, as I described in the following quotation. I can of mine own self do nothing. John 5:3. My Father worketh hitherto, and I work. John 5:17. With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Matthew 19:26. Take note that the nexus is one point, a singularity, meaning that you must be of one mind. You must have an undivided mind in order to remain in the nexus. Once you allow your mind to be divided by the illusion of separation and the dualistic images, the conscious self will inevitably fall into the lower part of the figure 8, from which it can no longer see the upper part. There are two important things to understand about the conscious self. It is the seat of your imagination and your free will. Its primary task is to build your sense of identity as a co-creator with God in the material world. It creates the sense of identity that is the foundation for your creative expression in this world. The practical implication of this are that your conscious self has the ability to imagine who and what it is, and it has the will to accept any given identity. In other words, at any given moment, the conscious self literally is who it thinks it is. If it identifies itself as a spiritual being who is a co-creator, the conscious self will remain in the nexus even while expressing itself in this world. It is then in the world but not of the world. Yet, the conscious self also has the ability to imagine a lesser sense of identity and to identify itself fully with it. When the conscious self builds and accepts a sense of identity that is partly or fully based on duality, it cannot remain in the nexus. It inevitably descends into the lower part of the figure 8, which means that it partly or wholly loses sight of your I Am presence, even loses all memory of its origin in the spiritual realm. It may even deny that the spiritual realm exists. This then brings us to the lower part of the figure 8, which we might call your container of self, the psyche, or even the soul, as is commonly done in spiritual teachings. I will stop 2 minutes. I forgot another time to do my circle of protection before the video, because I was very enthusiastic with the previous video with my new circle of sharing in the French countries. I forget, and I feel different energies. Maybe you don't know that, but when we talk, when we give conferences, lectures, when we are sharing informations, many people of the other planes, astral plane, mental plane, causal plane, are watching us. We are our television, their television, and they look in. They are not incarnated. They are without the physical body in the other planes, and they watch what we do, and they try to influence us. And some beings don't like when we do things that can awaken people, that can change the life here, because some people want to be in a state of domination over other person who feel they are victim, that they are not divine. So there are forces, beings who try to stop us, and I know that there is many beings watching when I do things with the recording, and also when I'm alone, writing, meditating, doing many things in consultation also. So I will do the circle of protection. The information is in French in my video of the January 1st, 2012. Ok. Au nom du Christ, par la puissance du Christ, par la majesté du Christ, je vous conjure, te vigos cos elim. Au nom du Christ, par la puissance du Christ, par la majesté du Christ, je vous conjure, te vigos cos elim. Au nom du Christ, par la puissance du Christ, par la majesté du Christ, je vous conjure, te vigos cos elim. All that is written in the text below my video of the Circle of Protection. Father, Mother, Christ, Divine Child, ask to my elemental, the fire, to trace the protection circle with you, with me, around the condominium here, 3 times in the astral world, the mental world, the causal world. Okay, first time. Second time. Third time. With that, no beings of other plane can try to extract energies from the chakras, can bother the energy. They are outside of the circle of protection, and everything is more quiet now. Thank you, thank you. And only Christhood beings, masters, can come, because it's a circle of light, of golden light. And only people who can maintain this vibration, this golden light inside of them, can come before sleeping. It's important if you work in light. Maybe some beings will, or entities will try to stop you, to bother you. So do your circle of protection, but before the conjuration, that push out of your apartment or house the entities, the negative entities, and after they are out, you do the circle in the golden light. And with that, you have no negative entity and you can work quietly. Okay, my feeling, it's very better. It's tools that we have to be in protection when we do powerful sharings or teachings. I think this video will be more than 2 hours, maybe 2 hours and a half. Okay, and you will see also the light outside. It's blue and it will be black. Maybe in 30 minutes you can see the color outside with the, in French we say la porte patio. It's the door in glass. In direction to the balcony. Here it's my new Havre de Paix, my new places. You have here places to sit down to discuss when we are in discussion, 2 people or a little bit more, little group, and the other place is for a massage, for tantric teachings, for quiet, very, very quiet thing and silence with beautiful music. Yeah, so you see a little bit of the place here. Okay, I continue. We are talking about the figure 8 with the big self and the small self, the lower self, the 2 parts, the consciousness, the mind on the nexus, one mind. Okay. Here comes the essential realization that the forces of this world do not want you to understand or accept. I earlier used the analogy of the white light in a movie projector that takes on the colors and shapes that are on the film strip. When you build a sense of identity that is based on duality, a mortal self, it resides in the lower part of the figure 8. Your conscious self can project itself into that lower part and experience the world through the filter of the mortal self. If it completely identifies itself with the mortal identity, it forgets its spiritual origin and inevitably comes to feel trapped in that mortal self. It might even believe that it is an evil or bad person because of the mistakes made through the mortal self. Yet here is the essential reality. Your conscious self cannot be permanently affected by anything in this world or in the lower part of your being. Your conscious self is still as pure as the white light in the projector. You may temporarily identify yourself as a human being, but in reality you are more, which means that you can always return to your true identity. Even if you identify yourself as a human being, your conscious self has not become a human being. You are simply letting the white light of your being shine through a film strip that portrays you as a human being. If you look only at the movie screen, the appearances of the material world, you might believe there is nothing more to your identity than what you see on the screen. Yet, you still have the ability to step out of that identity and experience that there is more to your total being. We might say that there are 2 aspects to your identity. One is the spiritual identity that is anchored in your I am presence. The other is the temporary identity that you use to express yourself in this world. You were created with a certain spiritual identity, but you have added to it through your life-supporting experiences and decisions over many embodiments. Yet, what is anchored in your I am presence, your treasure laid up in heaven, cannot be destroyed by anything in this world, because it resides in a realm of higher vibrations that makes it untouchable to any of the forces of this world. The temporary identity that you have created can be either in alignment with your spiritual identity, or it can be out of alignment with it. One may One way to describe the path to personal Christhood is to say that it is a process of bringing your temporary identity into alignment with your spiritual identity, so you are no longer a house divided against itself. How can you return to your true identity? It is a twofold process of uncreating the mortal sense of identity, while at the same time creating a spiritual sense of identity for how you express yourself in this world. Paul called it putting off the old man and putting on the new man, Ephesians 4:22-24. By doing this, you are not left in a vacuum with no identity, which the conscious self finds very difficult to handle. We might say that the light in the movie projector has forgotten that it is the pure light and has come to identify itself with the images that are projected onto the screen. In order to change what is projected onto the screen, meaning your outer material circumstances, you must first become aware that the images are only projections of what is on the film strip, which is located in your psyche. We might also say that your current sense of mortal or human identity forms a film strip that obscures another film strip, namely the spiritual identity that is anchored in your I am presence. This is a combination of the individuality that you were endowed with at your birth as a spiritual being, and the individuality you have built upon the rock of Christ in past lifetimes. Thus, by removing the mortal film strip, you will not end up with an empty container. Instead, your spiritual identity will begin to shine through, as it is already doing in some situations. You can now start the gradual process of erasing some of the images that are based on duality, while replacing them with images that are based on the truth of Christ. This will cause you to project purer images onto the film strip, the matter light, which means you will inevitably experience better material circumstances. When you change the film strip, you inevitably change the images on the screen. When you change the cause, you inevitably change the effect. When you change the action, you change the reaction. We now see that the process of rising to the Christ consciousness is taking place largely in the lower part of your being, which we can also call your container of self. The image of the container is fruitful because it illustrates that you have a container of your lower being, and your conscious self has chosen to allow certain elements from the material world to enter and accumulate. Thus, raising your consciousness is a matter of evaluating the contents of the container of self, purifying the container of imperfect images and beliefs, while improving what can be improved. It is like spring cleaning. Some things need to be organized better, others need to be repaired, and still others simply need to be thrown out. What has all this got to do with fear? Well, if you are afraid to take a look at the contents in the container of self, how can you ever purify those contents? We now have the foundation for understanding where fear comes from, or rather, which part of your lower being is the cause of fear. I have said it several times, but have you fully grasped the essential truth? Your conscious self is real. That which is real cannot be affected by that which is unreal, meaning that your conscious self cannot be affected by any imperfect conditions on earth. If your conscious self cannot be affected by any of these conditions, why would it you fear anything on earth. What I am actually saying here is that your conscious self truly cannot be afraid of anything. Yet then, why do you have fear in your being? Well, the answer is that there is a part of your being which is capable of being afraid of the things of this world, and that part is, of course, your ego. Yet, do you understand why the ego fears the conditions of this world? It is because the ego is not created out of God's being, and thus the ego has no ultimate reality. The ego is made from the vibrations, the energies of the material world, and so are the outer conditions you see in this world. Therefore, your ego can indeed be affected by these conditions, which is why it fears them. The ego knows that external conditions have power over it. Do you see the essential difference? Your conscious self is made from the higher spiritual vibrations of God's being, and thus it cannot be affected by the lower material vibration of this world. Vibrations of this world. Consequently, nothing from this world can touch your conscious self. Do you understand why this is so? A sunbeam is made from light that vibrates at a higher frequency than mud. Mud, contrary to what your senses and everyday experience tells you, is also made from light, energy, only it has a much lower vibration than sunlight. Thus, you can throw mud at a sunbeam all day long without making it dirty. The mud, made of grosser vibrations, simply passes through the sunbeam without even touching it. In contrast, the ego is made from the vibrations of the material world. Thus, it can indeed be affected by these vibrations, meaning that your ego can literally be hurt by some of the energies in the material world. Obviously, mud will not cling to your ego, but certain mental and emotional energies will, and we will later take a closer look at these energies. Let us take another look at the concept that because the ego is made from the energies of the material world, it has reason to fear some of the imperfect conditions in this world. This means that it is understandable that the ego has fears. Yet, no matter how understandable this is, a disciple of Christ needs to rise above these fears, and here is how this can be done. The question is how the conscious self, who has no need to fear anything, can come to actually feel, or rather believe, that it feels fear. The reason is, as I explained earlier, that your conscious self has as its task to create a sense of identity for how you interact with this world. If the conscious self is centered in the nexus, it will retain its connection to the I Am presence, and thus it will know it is above and beyond anything in this world, meaning it has nothing to fear. Yet, when the conscious self begins to create a sense of identity that is based on duality, then it gradually forgets its spiritual nature. Your ego, the mortal identity, forms the equivalent of a piece of colored glass, and when you shine a sunbeam through glass, it takes on the color of the glass. This illustrates that your conscious self can choose to look at the world through the colored glasses of the ego, and thus it can temporarily come to see the world as the ego sees it, and thus take on temporarily the ego's fear. Yet, while the ego can never escape its fear, the conscious self can escape this fear by reconnecting to who it is, whereby it will no longer be looking through the filter of the ego. What actually happens is that a mortal, human, limited self is created, a self that lives in the lower part of the figure eight, your container of self. We will later talk more about how this self is built, but for now, the important point is that this mortal self is, by its very nature, afraid of the imperfections in this world. So, when the conscious self begins to identify itself as this mortal self, it will look upon the world through the filter of the mortal self, similar to a person wearing colored glasses. The conscious self will now look upon the world as a dangerous place with many imperfect conditions that can hurt it. One common effect of this is that you begin to fear that what can hurt your physical body can actually hurt you. That is one reason why I said, quotation, "And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." Matthew 10:28.